It was a normal night, or at least it started that way. I'd been sitting on the couch, mindlessly scrolling through my phone like I'd done 100 times before. But then it happened. Suddenly, a strange dizziness washed over me. The room blurred, my heart raced, and before I could even call out for help, everything went black. When I woke, I wasn't in my living room anymore. I was floating, weightless, staring down at myself. My lifeless body slumped over, my phone still glowing in my hand. Panic gripped me. Was I dead? Before I could make sense of it, a blinding light pierced the darkness, illuminating everything with an intensity I can't put into words. And that's when I saw him. Not a vague silhouette, not a feeling or an idea. Him. A presence so powerful, so filled with light and love, I couldn't look away. He extended his hand, and I reached out instinctively. The moment our hands met, my entire reality shifted, and I was thrust into a vision that revealed what's coming before 2025. What I saw changed everything I believed about life, technology, and the future of humanity. And now I have to ask you, are you ready for what's coming? Because the time to prepare is running out. My life wasn't extraordinary, just busy and noisy like everyone else's. I spent my days juggling work, errands, and distractions, always glued to a screen. It was so easy to get lost in the endless cycle of scrolling through TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, watching other people's lives while ignoring my own. I told myself it was harmless, but deep down, I knew better. The truth, I was restless. There was this gnawing feeling that no matter how much I scrolled, I wasn't really connecting with anything. Just existing. I'd wake up every morning already overwhelmed, checking notifications before even stepping out of bed. By the end of the day, I'd plop onto the couch with my phone in hand, thinking, just a few more minutes of mindless content to unwind. Hours would slip away, and yet somehow I'd feel emptier than before. That night was no different. The glow of the screen was the only light in the room, a tiny portal to distractions I didn't need but couldn't seem to resist. My heart felt heavy with a kind of boredom I couldn't name, but I never thought much about it. I didn't know it then, but that hollow feeling wasn't just boredom. It was something deeper, something trying to wake me up. What happened next wasn't just a wake-up call. It shattered the comfortable lie I'd been living. And looking back, I wonder, was I even ready to hear what it was trying to tell me? It happened so quickly. One moment, I was scrolling, my finger lazily swiping through videos, the faint buzz of the screen filling the quiet room. Then, a strange dizziness hit me, like a sudden wave of vertigo. The glow of the phone grew unbearably bright, and the edges of my vision blurred into darkness. My body felt heavy, like it was sinking into the couch, yet my mind was weightless, detached. I remember trying to stand, to call out for someone, anyone, but before I could even take a breath, everything went still. The silence was deafening. I opened my eyes, but I wasn't in my living room anymore. I was floating, suspended in a strange void, looking down at myself. My body lay crumpled on the couch, the phone still glowing cold and lifeless in my hand. It should have been impossible, but there I was, watching. Fear gripped me as I tried to cry out, to reach down and shake myself awake, but nothing worked. I was trapped, powerless, and silent, my heart pounding in a body I couldn't even feel. Then, from the corner of the darkness, a piercing light appeared, so bright it seemed to cut through me. At first, I couldn't make sense of it. It wasn't just light, it was alive, radiating warmth, power, and something deeper. Love. The kind of love that makes you feel exposed yet comforted at the same time. And from within that light, a figure emerged. He didn't say who he was, but somehow I knew. There was an authority about him, a presence that demanded my full attention. His eyes, gentle yet unyielding, met mine, and for a moment, the fear gave way to awe. He extended his hand toward me, and without thinking, I reached for it. The moment our hands touched, everything shifted. The darkness dissolved into an overwhelming vision, like stepping through a door into another reality. All around us were glowing screens, countless of them, floating eerily in midair. Phones, tablets, TVs, each one alive, pulsating with an unnatural energy. But it wasn't the devices themselves that froze me in place. It was what I saw within them. Faces, millions of faces, staring blankly into the screens as if hypnotized. Their expressions were hollow, empty, as though the light from the screens had drained them of their souls. Chains extended from every screen, wrapping tightly around wrists, ankles, and even hearts. On each chain was a word, engraved as though burned into the metal: distraction, envy, despair, lust, pride. I whispered, my voice trembling, "They don't even know they're chained." The figure beside me, the one who had guided me here, turned to me with an expression of deep sadness. "That," he said, his voice both gentle and heavy with sorrow, "is the enemy's greatest weapon, to enslave without being seen." In that moment, I realized the horrifying truth. These weren't just chains, they were traps. Traps created by a force darker and more cunning than I could comprehend. And as I stood there, trying to process the weight of what I was seeing, I couldn't stop asking myself one question. Was I already caught in these chains too? As the vision shifted, the glowing screens and chains dissolved, and I found myself standing in the middle of an enormous battlefield. But it wasn't a battlefield like you'd imagine. There were no guns or soldiers, no trenches or explosions. Instead, it was filled with people. On one side were parents, grandparents, and elders, their faces etched with frustration and anger. They were pointing fingers, shouting accusations, their voices trembling with bitterness. "You're lazy, selfish, and addicted to your phones. You're destroying everything we worked for." On the other side were younger people, my generation, clinging to their devices, shouting back just as fiercely, "You don't understand us. You created these problems. You left us with this mess." The chaos was overwhelming. Shouts overlapped. Anger crackled in the air, and neither side seemed willing to listen. I stood frozen, watching as the unseen figure who had guided me into this vision pointed to the far edges of the battlefield. There, in the shadows, was a figure cloaked in darkness, watching, laughing. The enemy. He wasn't fighting, at least not directly. He didn't need to. He was thriving, feeding off the division, fanning the flames of anger and blame. The radiant figure beside me spoke again, his voice soft yet filled with sorrow. "They are meant to be united, fighting together against this darkness. But look how the enemy has turned them against each other." His words sank into me like a stone. As I watched, I could see it clearly, the endless cycle of arguments, each one widening the gap between generations. Parents dismissing the struggles of their children, children resenting their parents for not understanding their pain. And in the center of it all, the enemy stood victorious. I turned to him, desperate for answers. "What can they do? What can we do?" "They must wake up," he said, his voice heavy with both warning and hope. "They must pray for each other, teach my word, and fight together, not against one another." The older generations must see that their children and grandchildren are under attack. They must protect them, not accuse them. And the younger must honor and learn from their elders, for I have placed wisdom in their hearts. As he spoke, I felt the weight of his words settle into my soul. I thought about how many arguments I'd seen in my own life, online, at home, between people I loved. None of it solved anything. It only made us weaker, more distracted, more vulnerable. The battlefield faded, but the image of the enemy standing victorious burned into my mind. His weapon wasn't swords or fire, it was division. And if we don't recognize that, if we don't wake up and fight back together, we're only helping him win. I realized then that the first event wasn't something coming. It was already here. A world consumed by division, tearing itself apart while the enemy waits to claim what's left. But it's not too late. If we see the chains for what they are, if we unite in prayer, in faith, in truth, there is still hope. The question is, will we? The battlefield dissolved, and in its place rose a towering temple unlike anything I'd ever seen. Its walls shimmered as if made of glass and metal, reflecting an artificial glow that pulsed like a heartbeat. Inside, the air was thick, almost electric, carrying a sense of awe and dread that clung to my skin. The temple was filled with people, thousands, maybe millions, all gathered in reverence. Their faces shone with the same eerie light that came from the massive screens lining every wall. But they weren't worshiping God. At the center of the temple was a figure seated on a throne, bathed in a cold, radiant light that seemed to draw everyone toward it. It wasn't a divine presence. It was human. Or at least, it looked human. This figure didn't radiate love or peace, but something else entirely. Power, control, and something deeply unsettling. I moved closer, weaving through the worshippers, and I realized they weren't just bowing. They were consumed, utterly entranced by this figure. Some held their phones high in the air like offerings. Others whispered praises, not of love or devotion, but of approval, status, and gratification. And that's when I saw it. The screens weren't just reflecting the figure on the throne. They were alive, pulsing with every thought, every action of the worshippers. They showed numbers, followers, likes, comments, a never-ending stream of validation flowing back and forth, chaining each person to their device. I turned to the radiant being beside me, panic rising in my chest. "What is this?" I asked, my voice trembling. Why are they worshiping this? He looked at me with a sadness that felt like it would shatter my heart. This is what happens when truth is traded for approval and worship is given to the created instead of the creator. They no longer see me. They see only what pleases them, what elevates them in the eyes of others. I looked again at the figure on the throne, the screens flickering its image into every corner of the temple, and I saw it more clearly now. It wasn't just one person or one thing. It was the manifestation of fame, of technology, of the allure of being seen and adored, no matter the cost. Don't they know this isn't real? I asked. They know, he said quietly, but they have chosen it anyway. For the enemy has made it easy, so easy, to value what fades over what lasts. He trains their hearts to crave the temporary until they cannot see the eternal. As he spoke, the light from the screens began to burn brighter, almost blinding. I shielded my eyes, but not before I saw the horrifying truth. Their worship was feeding the figure. With every bow, every cheer, every tap on a glowing screen, it grew stronger, more dominant, and the worshippers grew weaker, their faces blank and hollow. I fell to my knees, overwhelmed by what I was witnessing. How can they escape this? I whispered. How do we stop it? They must remember who they were created to worship, he replied. They must return to me. Only truth can free them from this deception. The temple began to fade, but the image of the throne, the glowing screens, and the worshippers stayed with me. The second event wasn't something far off. It was already in motion. Technology wasn't just a tool anymore. It was becoming an idol. And if we're not careful, if we continue to choose the approval of others over the truth of God, we will find ourselves bowing to something far more dangerous than we can imagine. I realized then that the real question wasn't whether this could happen. It was already happening. The real question was, when will we wake up? The scene shifted again. This time, I found myself standing in the middle of a massive crowd, a city square that stretched beyond the horizon, packed with people from every walk of life. Their eyes were fixed on towering holographic screens that hung in the sky like celestial commands. On these screens was a single glowing symbol, burning with an otherworldly light, a mark. As I scanned the crowd, I noticed something chilling. On many of their foreheads and wrists, that same mark began to appear, faint at first, but then glowing brighter with each passing second. It seemed to bind them, drawing them closer to the symbol in the sky. I felt a sharp pang of fear as I realized what was happening. These people weren't questioning it. They were accepting it, embracing it, as though it were a gift or a promise. Some smiled in awe. Others whispered words like unity, progress, and peace. But not everyone followed. Scattered throughout the crowd were those who refused the mark. Their expressions were different, not entranced, but anguished. They clung to each other, shielding their foreheads and wrists as if to resist whatever was trying to claim them. The division was stark, as though a line had been drawn through humanity itself. Those who accepted the mark stood in a radiant glow, celebrated and praised. But those who resisted were met with cold, blank stares from shadowy figures lurking at the edges of the square. Without warning, the shadows moved, dragging these people away, silencing their cries into a darkness that swallowed them whole. I turned to the divine presence beside me, my voice shaking. Why are they accepting this? Can't they see what it's doing to them? They cannot see, he said, his tone heavy with sorrow. For they have been prepared to trust what feels good, what is easy, what promises comfort. The mark is not forced upon them. It is accepted willingly, and that is the enemy's greatest deception. He does not compel, he convinces. A wave of desperation flooded my heart. I wanted to scream to the crowd, to beg them to stop, to think, but I knew they wouldn't listen. The ones who had chosen faith were being silenced, and those who accepted the mark had given themselves over to something they didn't understand. But then, through the crowd, a light pierced the darkness. It wasn't the blinding cold light of the mark, it was warm, steady, and undeniably alive. From the edges of the square came a group of people, glowing faintly yet unmistakably, with the same presence I had felt in him. These people weren't afraid. They weren't shouting or fighting. They simply walked among the crowd, whispering quietly to the few who would listen, pointing not to the mark, but to the heavens. "What is this light?" I asked. "They are my faithful ones," he answered, a note of hope softening his voice. "They carry my spirit, my truth, and though many will not listen, some will. Some will be saved." As I watched, a few from the crowd broke away, the glow of the mark fading from their foreheads as they ran toward the light. It wasn't many, but it was enough to kindle a spark of hope in me. "This is the choice," he said, turning to meet my eyes. "Each must decide whom they will serve. But know this, the time to choose is running out. Soon, the line will be drawn, and there will be no turning back. The vision began to blur, fading like a dream, but the weight of what I had seen remained heavy in my heart. The third event wasn't just about a mark, it was about a choice, one that all of humanity would face. It was a moment of truth, a reckoning that would divide those who cling to faith from those who surrender to comfort and control. And though the enemy seemed powerful, I knew that hope still flickered in the hearts of the faithful. The question wasn't whether we'd have to make the choice. The question was whether we'd make it in time. When I came back to myself, it was like waking from a dream. Only the weight of what I'd seen stayed with me. I looked around the same room I'd been sitting in earlier, same couch, same phone glowing faintly where I'd dropped it. But everything felt different now. I felt different. I thought about all the hours I'd spent staring at that little screen, letting it dictate my thoughts and steal my time. Time I could have spent praying, building relationships, or helping others. I thought about the arguments I'd brushed off, the warnings I'd ignored, convinced that all of it was harmless. And for the first time, I realized it wasn't harmless. I felt a wave of regret wash over me, so heavy it made my chest ache. How much of my life had I wasted feeding into distractions? How many opportunities had I missed to focus on what really mattered? To focus on my faith, on my purpose, on the people I loved? But as that regret settled in, so did something else: determination. I couldn't change the time I'd wasted, but I could change what I did with the time I had left. I didn't want to be one of those people lost in the glow of a screen, blind to the chains that held them. I didn't want my family, my friends, or even strangers to walk the same path, unaware of the choices they were making. So I made a decision right then and there, a decision to put down my distractions, to clear away the noise, and to focus on what truly matters: my spiritual health, my relationship with God, and the people around me. I'm not going to pretend this is easy. Breaking free from the habits and comforts we've built around us takes work, a lot of work, but the vision showed me what's at stake, and I can't ignore it anymore. This isn't just about me, it's about all of us. It's about choosing faith over distractions, truth over comfort, and unity over division. The enemy wants us scattered, distracted, and blind, but we can choose to see. So I'm asking you, no, pleading with you, to take a hard look at your life. Ask yourself, what's holding me back? What's distracting me from what really matters? And what can I do right now, today, to make a change? It's not too late. We can still turn back, still help guide our loved ones, still choose what's right. But time is running out. Let's not waste another second. The choice is yours and ours to make. Let's make it count. As I sat in the quiet stillness after the vision, the weight of everything I had seen settled into my heart. But there was one thing that stood out more than the fear, the regret, or even the urgency of the message: hope. Despite all the darkness I had witnessed, there was still a light, a promise. And it wasn't just for me. It was for all of us. The challenges ahead won't be easy. The distractions, the division, the deceit, they're everywhere. They tug at us daily, pulling us further from what matters most. But we don't have to face this alone. We were never meant to. Faith is the anchor that steadies us in the storm, the light that guides us through the darkest valleys. And no matter how lost we feel, no matter how far we've drifted, God is always there, waiting for us to turn to Him. This is our chance to choose something different, to reclaim our lives, our relationships, and our purpose. Start small. Turn off the screens during dinner. Share a heartfelt conversation with your loved ones. Open the Bible and let its truths sink in. Pray even if it's just a few words. These simple actions, done with intention, can create ripple effects far beyond what we can see. Think about the people in your life, your parents, your children, your friends. What example do you want to set for them? What seeds of faith, hope, and love can you plant today? The choice is ours to make, not just for ourselves, but for the generations to come. The visions I saw weren't meant to scare me into hiding. They were meant to wake me up and to wake us up. The time is now to take a stand, to live a life that reflects our faith, and to cling to the truth that never changes. So I ask you, what will you choose? Will you continue letting distractions and lies shape your path? Or will you rise above it and seek something greater? The time to act is now. Let's step into the light together and face what's ahead with courage, faith, and love. Because no matter how dark the world seems, the light of God is brighter. The choice is ours. The time is now. Are you ready?